order. And you're going to watch a short video, right?
Yeah, just a minute. I'm getting this meeting going. It's not recording yet.
Okay.
We're almost there. All right, we're ready. Would you like for me to play the video now, or did you want to start from the beginning?
Well, are you going to run the video?
Yes.
Why don't you do that, and then we'll call the roll.
Okay.
Did
Christina,
you
would
share your audio, Christina?
I'm sorry, the audio's not sharing. Okay.
Due to COVID-19, this meeting will be
Hey,
conducted.
Terry Ann.
would you like me to share the video?
Yeah, please.
Due to COVID-19, this meeting will be conducted as a Zoom meeting pursuant to the provisions of the Governor's Executive Order N-2920, which suspends certain requirements of the Brown Act. This meeting is being live streamed on the CCTA website. The chair will call upon members, staff, and other speakers by name. Please speak clearly and state your name before giving comments or remarks. Persons participating via Zoom with their cameras enabled are reminded that their activities are visible to viewers. Members participating by Zoom wishing to speak should physically raise their hand and unmute their mic when called upon. Members should remute their mics when done speaking. Citizens participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the raise hand feature or dial *9 if participating via phone. The chair or staff will call upon them at the appropriate time. Citizens will have 3 minutes to speak. A 30-second warning will be provided. After 3 minutes, staff will lower their hand and mute their mic. Participants via phone will be called upon by the last 4 digits of their phone number. It is requested that public speakers state their names and organization, but providing such information is voluntary. Written public comments received in accordance with the COVID-19 Special Notice for Public Comment Guidelines are printed on the meeting agenda. If authors of the written correspondence would like to speak, they should raise their hand and the chair will call upon them at the appropriate time. All written correspondence received after that and during the meeting will be entered into the record. A roll call vote will be taken for all action items. Thank you for participating in a meeting of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority.
Okay, Christina, we call the roll now, please.
Yes. Chair Tom Butt,
Here?
Vice Chair Geringer,
Here.
Member Arnrich,
Here.
Member Taylor,
Here.
Member Pierce.
Here.
We have all of our members here.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is public comment. Have we received any requests to address the committee?
We have not received any public comment.
Okay, is there anyone wishing to speak during public comment that is not a part of the agenda? If so, please raise your hand and staff will call on you. No hands, okay. Um, The next item is approval of minutes from September 3rd, 2020. Are there any changes or comments from the committee? Is there anyone from the public who would like to address this item? Okay, we have a motion to approve the minutes.
Move approval, Pierce?
Okay,
Second.
motion from Pierce,
Second.
second from Arnerick. Call the roll, please.
Okay, Committee Member Arnrich,
Yes.
Committee Member Pierce,
Yes.
Committee Member Taylor,
Yes.
Vice Chair Geringer,
Yes.
and Chair Butt.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
The next item is the consent calendar. Is there anything anybody wants to remove from the consent calendar?
Yes, Chair, but I just like to hear from Brian on item number 2, just kind of verbal reassurance where we are with sales tax. I know we have a report, but I'd just like to hear your thoughts and
You
'Cause
you
you've
want
had
to take it off the agenda or just ask a question?
just really the question, then we can do that.
Okay,
Good morning, Chair Butt and Commissioners. Mr. Arnrich, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about sales tax. It's we've been meeting with HDL a number of times, and we were meeting with them monthly to discuss the sales tax analysis. And we are very surprised by the high numbers and what's happening for this fiscal year, this current fiscal year, and what happened in last fiscal year is the numbers are coming in a lot higher than anticipated. A lot of people have shifted to online purchasing. With everybody working from home, the building and industry is seeing a lot of sales tax in home improvement areas. Car sales were up a little bit at the end of last fiscal year. That could be pent up demand on some cars prior to COVID, and a lot of people also now commuting via cars versus taking public transportation. So far, when in August, we had our final payment for the year with the cleanup payment through June, and it was much higher. And we're seeing delinquencies coming in that weren't submitted in March. So our sales tax, was up for the final quarter of last fiscal year due to delays in payments. So that helped bring our sales tax numbers up greatly, up to about $93.5 million. And so what we're seeing so far and the advances and late payments that are coming in September and October, we're already 3.25% higher than what we received last fiscal year. So I don't anticipate that this is going to continue through the year. We're going to meet again with HDL next month to talk about some of our strategies for the rest of the fiscal year. But again, we don't know until we get through the winter months. We don't know, just like everybody else, what's going to happen. And at that time, hopefully by the time we do the mid-year budget, we'll be able to bring the sales tax budget number up from 76.5 million to whatever we see the economy doing. So from a finance perspective, I'm very pleased with what we've seen. Hopefully that's trickling down to the cities as well. And, again, CCTA and our region in Contra Costa County is very diverse, and there's a lot of different sales tax areas in there. So hopefully that answered your question.
No, Brian, I really appreciate that. And I think your last question is yes, most of the cities are seeing it. It's the pooling from the county pooling source for online sales that's really saving us. I bought a new car last week, so I'm helping out. But thank you for that. I really appreciate it. I just wanted to hear how confident you were in what you see and what your view was. So thank you. So with that, I would move the entire consent calendar.
Second.
okay, motion by Arnrich, second by Geringer, right? Okay, who seconded it?
Pierce?
Do it.
Okay, call the roll, please.
Okay, Committee Member Arnrich,
Yes.
Committee Member Pierce,
Yes.
Committee Member Taylor, Committee Member Taylor,
Yes.
Vice Chair Geringer
Yes.
and Chair Butt.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, that brings us to regular agenda items. The next item is a legislative update. Lindsay Willis will present this item.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. Unfortunately, Mark Watts was not able to join us this morning to give you the state update, but he did provide a pretty robust report for you in your packet. So I'm happy to take any questions you may have about that. We're watching, like everyone else, really carefully what's happening with funding at the state level as this next year unfolds. And we will be back to you in December with probably both the state and the federal legislative platforms for your consideration. But since we do have our federal advocates with us this morning, if there are no questions on what's happening at the state level at this time, I'm happy to turn it over to Jason Tai and Gus Maples to give you the outlook on what's happening at the federal level.
Great, thanks, Lindsay. Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, Mr. Director. Nothing's happening in DC, so we have nothing. No, I'm kidding. But I think on the short term, and we'll turn it over to Gus to provide kind of a broad overview and then kind of a look forward on what things may look like, but just to kind of get this particular item out of the way for the lame duck Congress, there are two sets of legislative items that Senator McConnell has come out and said, this is something what we have to do. Number one is there's concurrence, as I understand it, between Speaker Pelosi and Majority Leader McConnell to run a COVID stimulus package before the end of the year. I know of its particular interest to many due to the fact that a lot of state and local governments are hurting. There is an opening now in terms of the negotiations and where state and local funding will be on the table, and some level of funding seems to be being discussed between House Democrats and Senate Republicans. The other item is, as you may have seen, is that we are currently in federal fiscal year 2021, and we are being funded through a stopgap continuing resolution through December 11th. The general feeling now is that there is a strong level of interest to pass a full year appropriations package to fund all of the various governmental agencies and move away from a full funding, stopgap funding for the remainder of this continuing resolution in the rest of this fiscal year. So those two items, I think, have been raised as significant high-level priority to-dos before the end of the year on a bipartisan basis. Now, the negotiations are still, early, but those are probably the two things I'd keep an eye on. And so with that, given the fact that not a whole lot's going on here in Washington, I'll turn it over to Gus, who has just written a very comprehensive memo on kind of a look forward towards next year. So with that, Mr. Maples.
Thanks, Jason. Good morning, everyone. As Jason sort of alluded to, Senate Majority Leader McConnell has said that there's an agreement in principle, at least, with Speaker Pelosi on finalizing the full year, rather than another extension, the full year appropriations bills to fund the government in fiscal 2021. That includes, obviously, all the discretionary programs that the Department of Transportation oversees, in addition to the federal government writ large. It looks like, obviously, there are still some states outstanding and final counts are subject to litigation, it sounds like, but it looks like we will be continuing to look at a Republican Senate majority and a slightly smaller, but still a Democratic controlled House. So the Congress layout should look the same next year. At least there is an agreement, like we alluded to, on stimulus. So now that the election's out of the way, there is hope for likely some state and local money to be included in that. possible formula changes based on what was done in the CARES Act back in March. But the fact that Senate Republicans now are more open to a bill is very promising for the next 60 so days in the lame duck before the new Congress starts. Democrats are also incentivized to sort of quote unquote clear the decks, anticipating a President Biden administration coming in January. And that also leads us into the FAST Act extension for surface transportation programs. That was extended for another calendar year back in September. And we have heard from House Transportation Committee, Peter DeFazio's team, that the Biden folks view his House-passed Moving Forward Act as a general framework to possibly put infrastructure on the table in a first 100 days scenario. That's very promising because that's when really big ticket items get taken care of in a new presidential administration. That bill, and it's subject to negotiations with the Senate at the end of the day. The Senate has passed its highway portion, but has not yet completed work on the transit and rail and safety programs portions. But the House passed bill does include many progressive climate priorities in addition to some new funding programs and grant programs. We're also working with the House Transportation Committee on modifications to what they call the Metro Performance Program, which allows certain localities, mainly MPOs as currently written, to receive a direct allocation from the Federal Highway Administration. That's a break from precedent, given that usually the money goes to the state and then trickles down elsewhere. But we're working on tweaks to that to better benefit localities as well as direct recipients. Another item of note that we've been working on this year and got confirmation from Congressman Mark DeSaulnier's team is he has agreed, and it's not publicly filed yet, but we're soon to be moving forward on his bill to fix the shared autonomous vehicles issue, where the current regulations are causing a bit of a headache for the pilot at the Walnut Creek senior community. So that is an important piece of legislation to get on Congress's agenda, looking into the reauthorization process in the future for a fix there as well. Outside of that, like Jason said, not much is happening in town.
And let me add, if I could, real quickly, is that on a particular note, in terms of our interest, Congressman Peter DeFazio, the chairman of the House Transportation Committee, was reelected in his race in Oregon. He came to visit Congressman DeSaulnier probably about 2 or 3 years ago, in which only one Bay Area Transportation Agency director was part of that tour, Mr. Iwasaki, thanks to Congressman DeSaulnier, where Randy and Mr. DeSaulnier took Chairman DeFazio to visit many of the transportation capital projects that are ongoing in the Bay Area. So I think he has a very, very special relationship with Randy and our team, and certainly with Congressman DeSaulnier in facilitating that. So I think all of those pieces being put into place are very, very helpful for when Congress moves on the $500 billion infrastructure package early next year.
There you go. Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from committee members? I don't see any. Any member of the public have a comment? If so, raise your hand. So unless we have an action item on this, which we don't appear to, this does not require any action by the committee. The next item is approval to develop a financing plan for the authority series 2018 A bonds. Ryan Kelleher will present this.
Brian, I believe you're still on mute.
My apologies. This was my worst nightmare. I went through this several times. Let me try again.
We can see it, Brian.
What's that?
We can see it.
Yeah, but it's not, I'm not being able to move the pages. Come on. All right.
There you go.
There we go. It's using the mouse. My apologies. Once again, my name is Brian Kelleher, the CFO for CCTA. I'll work on my computer skills. My apologies. This morning, I'm here with KNN Public Finance Municipal Advisors, Melissa Schick, the director, David Leifer, Senior Managing Director for KNN Public Finance. They're going to help me out with the presentation here today. As you know, about 2.5 years ago, we went through looking at refinancing our bonds. As part of that, the authority issued its 2018 bonds with the following objectives. If you remember, many years ago, they changed the tax reform, and so our interest rate went up on a monthly basis. So what we worked with KNN, and we brought to the board a plan to partially terminate the interest rate swap that was previously at 200 million. It was reduced to 100 million of floating rate notes. And then the other 100 million was put into a fixed rate bond. So here we are again today. The interest rate swap every 3 years, depending on what the market is giving in those particular days when we go to the market. It could be a 3-year, it could be a 5-year, or it could be a 7-year, depending on how the interest rates look and in cost to what rates we would pay, and then the cost of coming back and refinancing in 3 years, 4 years, or 5 years. And so there's hedges, and the 2018 A bonds is hedged with a variable interest rate. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to set the table for what our plans are. And the first thing we need to do is we need to work with you, have you give us the approval to create a financing team, to work with the underwriters, to start getting some ideas. We've met with several underwriters. We've seen different, KNN has worked with other agencies. And so they're going to help guide us through what the next steps are going to be. We will come back to the board. So staff is seeking approval to move forward with developing and finalizing a plan of finance. So again, here's our outstanding debt portfolio. If we take the original par on all of these bonds that we have outstanding, it's 634 million. Due to the principal payments we've been making over the last several years, it's down to about 450 million. The 200 million interest rate swap that we discussed a few minutes ago is now 100 million. And so what we need to do is go back to the market by September 1st of next fiscal year. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Melissa, who's going to talk about the interest rate swap and take us through the next several slides.
Good morning, commissioners, and it's a pleasure to be with you this morning and to see your familiar faces. I'm joined by my colleague, David Leifer. On this slide, we just wanted to brief, maybe update you all, as well as provide a little bit more detail in terms of what we're looking at for the coming year. But as a reminder, the 2018 bonds have a floating rate of interest, and that floating rate is based on a percentage of LIBOR plus a fixed credit spread. And that the floating rate on the 2018 A bonds is hedged or offset by the authority's interest rate swap. In the agreement with the swap, the authority receives a variable rate, which is meant to offset the variable rate of interest on the 2018 A bonds, and the authority pays a fixed rate of interest back to the swap counterparty at approximately 3.6%. So in tandem, the net borrowing cost associated with both the 2018 A bonds and the interest rate swap, it tends to be around 3.7, 3.6% based on the fixed swap payment and the variable swap receipt offsetting the variable payment on the bonds. We note that both the swap and the bonds are based on the LIBOR index. And that's another aspect of this borrowing arrangement that we will contend with in the upcoming year. So what are our objectives as we look to the next year associated with both the bonds and the swaps? Is first and foremost to reset the interest rate on the bonds. And we need to do that before September 1st of, I'm sorry, that's a typo, it should be 2021. And in doing so, we will use certain parameters to guide the plan of finance. First is to pursue a low borrowing cost alternative. Second, the current mode of interest is based on LIBOR, and LIBOR will be phasing out in December of next year. And so we will look at a new variable interest rate index for the reset of the 2018 bonds. And then we will also look to limit the mismatch between the variable receipt on the swap that is intended to offset the authority's variable payment on the bonds. Again, remember that the swap is tied to LIBOR, which may be adjusted with the phase out of LIBOR. So we will be looking at both the swap and the bonds in tandem. While we're in the market to address the new rate of interest on the 2018 bonds, it would be our objective to also evaluate other opportunities within the authority's debt portfolio. One, interest rates are currently at historic lows, and we have expectations that these rates will remain low into next year. And so there may be some refunding opportunities to exercise on the authority's outstanding debt. So it would be the issuance of new bonds to take out the old bonds at a lower interest cost. And then also we will continue to monitor the outstanding swap. We understand the desire to reduce the debt portfolio risk associated with the swap, and we will continue to evaluate the economics of a full or partial termination of the interest rate swap as we did in 2018. Slide 7 just provides an overview of alternatives that we are looking at for the 2018 bonds. And really, this is just meant to mean there's several alternatives that we can look at. There's not a lot of definition at present around what the best mode will be next year. On the floating rate side, because the LIBOR index is going away, there's still some market uncertainty about what floating rate products will look like and what the rate of interest will be pegged to, whether it be the traditional tax exempt index, which is SIFMA, or the replacement to LIBOR, which is been determined to be SOFR. With all this being said, again, the desire is as we are evaluating an interest rate mode on the bonds, we will also be taking into consideration the variable receipt on the swap And together between the lowest cost alternative, as well as how that lower cost alternative matches to the swap, that will help guide our plan of finance for the bonds. So with regard to other debt portfolio opportunities while in the market, I mentioned earlier the possibility to execute a refunding of outstanding authority obligations. The authority fixed rate bonds have call dates in the years of 23, 25, and 27. And so the way the tax law works, you could issue tax exempt bonds to refund these outstanding bonds at the call date. Or alternatively, you could execute an advance refunding. So that would mean that you would refund the outstanding bond series ahead of these call dates. And next year would be 2021. So that would be ahead of the 23 and the 25 and the 27 call dates. That refunding would have to be done so on a taxable basis. One might say, why would I swap out my tax exempt rate of interest for a taxable rate of interest? Their taxable rates are low, historically low, and we have found that several issuers, a number of issuers, have executed taxable advance refundings to achieve debt service savings. This requires a good amount of analysis because there is a trade-off between executing an advance refunding today versus waiting until the call date and executing a tax-exempt current refunding closer to the time when the bonds can be called. Another area that would be evaluated in tandem with the 2018 bonds is the swap. And again, looking at the strategy in 2018, it would be a similar strategy that we would endeavor to take in 2021. What's the cost of terminating all or some of the swap and replacing both the portion of the swap and the variable rate bonds with just fixed rate bonds? Currently, the cost of terminating the entire 100 million notional amount of swap is 32 million. That's come down from a high of 36 million in July. And as the valuation changes over the coming months, this will be an area of focus for us to look at, and the economics around terminating the swap. So as I mentioned earlier, there's some pretty big market factors that will drive our plan of finance. One mostly is just seeing how the market coordination around the LIBOR transition plays out and the implications to the plan of finance, both on the floating rate note side as well as on the swap side. And again, those will be they will be looked in tandem to ensure that the authority remains appropriately hedged based by its borrowing cost and its floating rate receipts. The other drivers clearly will be interest rates and the market environment when we look to implement the plan of finance. As long-term rates, I mentioned, are historically low. If they do remain at today's levels, there's certainly merit to looking at some advanced refunding opportunities for some portion of the authority's outstanding fixed rate bonds. And with that, Brian.
Thank you, Melissa. So next steps for CCTA. So in the timeframe now through January 2021, we're going to assemble the financing team. We'll go ahead and we'll reach out to the underwriters to help them help us develop a plan. We'll use KNN to help us come back to the board in February and April with some analysis and alternatives and the optimal plan of finance to be developed and for you guys to approve and have some discussion on what best fits CCTA and moving forward. So with that, we'll most likely in June seek approval to move forward after we've had the time to meet with you to go over what our plan of finance will be. And it's targeted to close in July of 2021. So there's a lot of heavy lifting, a lot of decisions. There's a lot of watching the markets. There'll be a lot of working with many people on the financing team to get us to where we need to be. So with that, I'll open it up for any questions, and Melissa and David or myself will be able to answer anything.
Are there questions or comments from committee members? I can't see everybody yet, so.
Tom, this is-
I'm looking and I'm not, oh, Commissioner Arnrich has a question.
Okay, go ahead, Newell.
Melissa and David, it's great to see you guys back. And again, thank you so much for when you came on board, for all the great positive work that you did for us in saving money. I guess I have 2 points. One, and I didn't hear it. I think one of the most strategic things that we have to also make sure we're looking at is that our agency, in theory, and this particular measure has a sunset date. And our whole portfolio needs to look at how we achieve that. And maybe this is our last opportunity to do all these refinancings. And I hope that that is what we're really focused on, is if this is likely our last opportunity. I mean, in our lifetime, this is the lowest interest rate periods that we've seen over the past few months. And given that we have an event horizon date, to make sure that our strategy is well laid out for that. And one of the problems is we can't end up here at the termination, was it 2034, 35, where we still have this negative values and we're still holding millions of dollars in the bank against this. We have wasted those funds, right? I mean, right now the buyout is just horrific. That's the worst math you could ever dream of. But we can't end up in an agency, let's just say in theory, we go away. And all of a sudden there's this X amount of cash, $17, $15 million, whatever it is, sitting there. And who knows what interest rates look like. I mean, it will never get good unless interest rates go up like this, right? Because we bought it. We didn't buy it. The agency bought it on the theory that interest rates were always going to go high. And that since the day we bought it, they went low. So we've always had this negative value. So that's one point. And isn't the SOFR rate right now, is that not, I know it's not substituted, but is that likely going to be used for LIBOR?
Yeah, I can start. I think let's first just hit SOFR because that's a relatively quick one. It is the likely replacement index. The challenge is that we have not seen any products in the market priced to that index. And so the market and investors and the underwriters are still kind of trying to work their way through exactly when SOFR will kick in. And when there will be investor acceptance for a SOFR indexed product. And that's our hope. Our hope is, as we start working through this process, is that the market will start evolving and trending toward SOFR. And by the summer months, there'll be more coordination around the LIBOR transition and the SOFR replacement.
Isn't there like 70 to 80 trillion dollars worldwide out there in interest rate swaps that have to switch over?
Correct. Yes.
So have they, I mean, obviously that's a big chunk of change. I mean, the national debt of the United States was 27 trillion. So that represents probably the majority of their debt out there. So has the SOFR, I mean, obviously you must be looking at SOFR in parallel to the LIBOR to see how it is working. And how is it working? Is it similar? Is it advantageous or disadvantageous?
Yeah, so the expectation is it's similar, but I'll have to say, you know, during the market turmoil around COVID in March early this year, it actually was the LIBOR index that just really hung in there, and it worked to the advantage of the authority, where SOFR and the tax exempt index, SIFMA, spiked above 7%, whereas LIBOR held steady. There are numerous millions, trillions products of LIBOR linked products that will need to transition. And quite frankly, it's slightly astounding. It's the bank community, the underwriter community, and the swap community is really just now starting to seem coordinated and get publications out in protocols out around the transition. So in fact, just yesterday, KNN and Brian, we were, you know, in contact with our swap advisor. And we have, you know, now just yesterday, there was some protocols released from ISDA in terms of the path forward and replacing SOFR for LIBOR. I think the expectation is that, remember, some of these products have an index plus a spread that's fixed. I think some of the expectation is that there would have to be some adjustment to the spread to make either the lender or the counterparty, I think as they would say, whole, based on the different, how SOFR is performing relative to LIBOR.
What do you think, I mean, if we went out and sold a $100 million bond, fixed rate, done, fixed term, what rate would we get given our credit rating if we were out today?
No, you'd, let's see, so your 2034 would be your final term, right?
Right.
So your, let's see, I would say probably 1.5%. We did a deal with, yeah, it's tremendous.
1.5%.
Yeah.
Everybody should hear that.
Yeah.
That is unbelievable. We got to get, you guys got to be rock stars on this. Fix our portfolio, get us out of this mess. Nobody sitting here got us into it. We got to get out of this. 1.5%. And we're sitting here looking at a financial, you know what, and we're paying, you know, effectively 3 times that or 2.5 times that. I mean, it's just, this is nuts. Do your job. Figure out, help us. You guys helped us before, please.
We will do our very best. And I think, you know, that was really Brian's objective in having this discussion today, such that your policy objectives are established and we have our marching orders in terms of, you know, the plan of finance and meeting your objectives.
Great. Thank you, Melissa, for everything. And we look forward to fantastic results here.
Okay, any other, Julie?
Yeah, I would just echo that. Melissa, you guys have just really done some heavy lifting for us and saved us a ton of money. Reducing the swap by 50% is huge. And like Newell, if we could wipe that off the map soon, that would be wonderful. I realize there's a cost to that. So, but, you know, 1/3 the interest would be pretty nice. So
yeah,
we'll be looking on to see how that goes. But thank you again. And thank you, Brian, for always looking out for us.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Are there any members of the public who'd like to speak? If so, raise your hand. We don't, I'm sorry.
I don't see anybody raising their hand.
Okay. Okay, is there a motion to move this item?
So moved.
Okay, motion from Pierce, second from Arnrich. Please do a roll call vote.
Committee Member Arnrich,
Yes.
Committee Member Pierce,
Yes.
Committee Member Taylor,
Yes.
Vice Chair Geringer,
Yes.
and Chair Butt.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
The next item on the agenda is an informational item to provide a project status update and upcoming milestones on the Bollinger Canyon Road Iron Horse Trail Bicycle and Pedestrian Overcrossing Project. Ivan Ramirez will make the presentation.
It's good morning, Chair and committee members. My name is Ivan Ramirez, and I'm the Director of Construction for the Authority. Before I move more on the presentation here, I want to make sure that you can see my presentation. You can hear me well. You
Yes,
do?
we
Okay.
can.
Okay, thank you very much. So my first item today is a discussion item, a brief update on the progress that has been made on the Iron Horse Trail Overcrossing project. It's a project that we are partnering with the City of San Ramon to deliver for them. My second item is an action item where we're going to ask you to move the item to the full board for approval of the selected CMGC contractor. So just a quick upgrade again, the overall cost of the project is $21 million. The City of San Ramon is the sponsor. We are the implementing agency, and what makes this project unique and exciting for everybody involved is that it is a CMGC project, and it's one of the very first ones. In fact, it's our very first one here at the Authority, and one of the very first ones perhaps for agencies of similar size as ours. So this is a overview of the project. The road that is crossing left to right, that's Bollinger Canyon Road, and this is where the trail approaches from both directions. As you can see, there is a slight offset between the two projects, and we are going to address, of course, connectivity of those two trails during the project, and you will see some slides later on that where the design is looking how to make that look pretty nicely, I will say. And the another point of reference for you is that across the street over there on Bollinger Canyon on the right, that building on the upper right quadrant, that is the City of San Ramon. So we're going to be working very closely with the city there because they're going to be watching every step that we take. So this is a slide of several alignments that have been developed by the designer and they have been proposed. But there's a lot of work that remains to be done, and we are waiting for the expertise from the CMGC to help us kind of narrow down which selection it will be done. But on this slide, the blue is at the actual bridge, the actual structure that's going to be built over Bollinger Canyon. The yellows are the approaches, and the greens are the tapers where the approaches are going to touch down with the existing grade of the trails. So this is a rendering that of alignment aid that the designer has come up with. Each one of these alignments that they have proposed need to be looked at very closely because underneath Bollinger Canyon, there are several, and along the trail, in fact, there are several utilities, and we have to thread the footings through those utilities. Each time we have to move or relocate a utility, it causes two problems. It will increase the cost, and we also will tend to delay the project. So the idea is to minimize the amount of the utilities that need to be relocated. And hopefully if we save money relocating utilities, then maybe more can be spent on the actual aesthetics of the bridge. This is a view of somebody walking on the bridge, how they would look at it with the nice curvatures there, again, to connect the trails. This is perhaps the more straightforward option where the alignment actually is matched very early on the south side. The right side of that picture there, that's the south side of the project. And then after that, it becomes a very straight bridge. And alignment C is very similar, other than, there is the bridge is straight, but it's coming at an angle, trying to connect the trails in a very nice and smooth manner. And as you can see that the difference between a straight bridge and a bridge with curvatures is very significant for the feel and look of the pedestrians and the bicyclists on the bridge. This is alignment D, which is very similar to A. And again, there are some renderings here of how it's expected that the bridge will look for the pedestrians. Here I have an updated slide showing all the key players. There are many players on this project, but we have selected almost all of them. You know, FHWA, Caltrans, they're very involved in this project. They're watching it very closely. They interact with this frequently. We have to get their approvals on many, many things. So they're hand in hand working with us. We came back to you in May and we asked you to select the independent cost estimator, Pricertus. We brought in, you also asked for your approval to hire the designer, which is COWI. And in my next item, after I finish this presentation, we're going to ask you to approve the selection of a joint venture of Shimmick and Myers, who were the contractors that won they were the highest ranked, I should say, contractors selected based on the selection process. And I also want to give you a brief update of where we're going as this process moves forward. What's unique about this project, again, is the process. And I want to make sure that I keep the board abreast of what we're doing. The two boxes on the left is where we've been. We procured the CMGC contractor for pre-construction services. And we also have moved the 35% PS&E as far as it can move before we engage the CMGC for their input. So the very next steps, and these are things that are being scheduled for next month, December of this year and January of next year, is we have to have a kickoff partnering workshop where all the key players come into the room, everybody gets familiar with the project, everybody gets familiar with one another, and everybody starts engaging in meaningful conversation to move this project as quickly as possible, as cheaply as possible, in the most convenient way possible. So along with that, we have to have risk workshops. These meetings are part of a CMGC process. They have to be documented. So everybody's kind of aware of what is it that the CMGC process is bringing to the project development. We have to prepare a cost model with the contractor so that when the estimates are being prepared, everybody's talking the same language with the same assumptions. We also have to start an innovation register, because not only are the risks monitored and checked, but also any innovation that gets adopted or rejected needs to be documented. And this is one of those things that the FHWA is looking very closely, because they're very interested in knowing how is it that the CMGC process is working for the project that they fund. Lastly, we're going to review the 35 PS&E. Out of those meetings come a phase where the designer works and preparing the 65 PS&E, engaging the contractor where he needs to. And then after that, we also have a series of meetings similar to the ones that I described in the previous slide, outside of the kickoff meeting, because by this time everybody's working close, everybody knows each other. And then the 90 to 95 PS&E gets prepared. Okay, so then this is where it becomes interesting, and it's the unique part of this process as far as pricing the project. Once we get to this late stage of the design, the CMGC creates a price proposal and he delivers it to us. Then the independent cost estimator will create its own estimate. We'll also have an engineer's estimate, so they're working out of 3 estimates. Everybody gets in the same room, everybody talks about the price proposal from the contractor. Then the agency needs to make a decision. Is the price proposal acceptable? If the price proposal is acceptable, then the price proposal becomes the agreed price. In other words, the contractor has agreed to do the work, the actual physical work in the field, at an agreed price. And the construction services will be awarded. We will come to the board and say, we feel confident that the price is correct, and therefore we ask for your approval of these construction services contract. Should the answer is no, the price proposal is not acceptable, then the next question is it possible that we can work through this, work out of different assumptions, different models, maybe change certain features of the final project? And if the answer is yes, then a new model is created, a new schedule is updated. The CMGC creates a new proposal and it comes back to the agency. And then the question becomes again, is the price proposal acceptable? If it is, then we go through the arrow, the green part of this chart. Well, yeah, it becomes the agreed price, so on. And if it's no, then is the price proposal is price proposal reconciliation possible? So we know what happens if the answer is yes, but if the answer is no, we can no longer meet because we're not going to go anywhere with this price proposal. We cannot reconcile our differences. Then the pre-construction services contract is terminated, and our partnership, our work arrangement with the CMGC to provide construction services ends completely. And then the PSNE, the 95% PSNE, gets changed to a procurement process that will be design bid build. So in other words, we will just put it out like any normal contract is put out, where we will get a low bid from a responsive bidder in a responsible bid. So with that, I just again wanted to provide an update on where we are in the project and what's coming up in the future. So you guys, the board is aware of what we're going to be looking for in the future and how we're going to be working through this project. And with that, I am open to any questions.
Other questions or comments from committee members?
Tom, I just had a question, Ms. Newell.
Go ahead, Neil.
Thank you. I'm glad you're working on this, my friend. You're the expert. Some new territory though, just in methodology, but the result is still, it's like a design build with, slightly different chart. So it looks like, obviously, the city of San Ramon assumes all the risk on this because our agency is doing it on their behalf and they're paying for it. But it still seems the big risk for change orders, even though this quote is like a design build, is the underground work. Because no matter what, there's nobody is going to know. And in Danville, we moved on the Iron Horse Trail all of the utilities. We moved them over a 2-block section, so about the same length that you're looking at, and we offset them significantly. And it worked. Fortunately, we had a clean site. We didn't have to worry about the traffic. We didn't have all of those other things. There was nothing on the site, so we could do that work first, then build the buildings. But to me, it seems like this is the real risk is, obviously once you get the alignment's got to be based on that utility cost, but not knowing what's underneath there, as we've seen in our own projects, that's been our risk. Do you think that there's the ability in this case for everybody's benefit and City of San Ramon's a customer to spend the right amount of money to absolutely get out there, not just pothole, dig, do whatever we got to do, since it's an accessible area. We just can't touch the street. Are we planning on doing that?
Yes, that's an excellent point, Commissioner. Let me first address the first part of your question, which is yes, we are working hand in hand with the city. They have vetted every decision. They are involved in the project development teams and the selection of the CMGC and the designers and the eyes. So yeah, that's a role that I take very seriously because we definitely want to make sure that they're on board with whatever decisions that are being taken. As far as the utilities, a huge amount of resources are being spent right now trying to locate a lot of all of the utilities. We've been involved with meetings in all kinds of utilities, and there are challenges. There are challenges. There is a main water line that it sits on the south side of the trail, and we either have to relocate it. They already warned us that can take a long time. It can be a lot of money because it's the only line that you have to create a bypass and so on because it creates potable water. And then what do we do with that? Because one way or another, we either have to put dirt or structures over that water line, or we have to relocate it. So ultimately, there's going to have to be some kind of matrix and decisions as to what is going to be relocated at what cost and what is going to have to be remain in place. And we're going to have to, again, work around it. So it's a fine-tuning process that we have to do, but I can assure you that a lot of time is being spent on that. And one of the first things that we're going to ask the CMGC when they come on board, because like I said earlier, we have moved this process as far as we can, is that, okay, how much is it going to cost to move this utility? And if it's too much, then we have to make trade-offs with how the structure is going to ultimately look, because obviously you want to have a nice, beautiful structure, but the less you spend relocating utilities, the more you can spend on the aesthetics of the bridge. So yeah, so though that is key. That's the key challenge they're facing right now. But we, based on what we have learned here at the authority, we're not going to minimize not spending money, because then it becomes you save money now and you pay later. So the idea is to look at as much as we can. As far as nobody knows, I have to agree with you. At the end of the day, there's always that remote possibility that there's things in there that nobody even knew existed. And that is something that, again, you can address as much as we can, and that's what we're trying to do. I hopefully answer your question, Commissioner.
If you're looking for a resource, he's retired though. You might have known him, but Steve Lake used to be our city engineer. He retired about 2 years ago. Still lives in Concord in the area. He's the one who oversaw that project. It was one of the largest downtown disruptive projects we've ever done in relocating all those utilities. Might be interesting to just chat with him. What did they find or not find, and how bad was the unknown in there? But I have great confidence. I just have great confidence in you, Ivan, and I'm so glad you're the one working on this thing. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I will say that we are also very lucky because the city of San Ramon did some work on Bollinger Canyon at this location, so they have a lot of knowledge of some of the utilities that are there.
Excellent. Well done.
Yeah, so that's very good.
Okay, other questions
you.
or comments? Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak? If so, raise your hand.
Tom, I had my hand there. I don't know. Do you see it?
I do now.
Okay, I had it right there.
Go ahead.
We'll let the public. Okay, I guess the question to a novice engineer, not like you experts, but just for my own gratification here, wouldn't we want that bridge to be straight lined? Because isn't it cheaper to build something on a direct line versus curves and over and unders and this type thing? I know about the utilities, but I'm saying, is that normally how you would like to build a bridge of that nature? Now, it's a very novice. That's a very novice question, and I
That's
apologize.
a good question. Yeah, the answer is yes.
Well, yeah. So, okay.
Yes.
So I feel good. It was a great question. I got. So my assumption was correct.
It's a good question, and yes, in fact, straighter is the structure itself. The straighter it is, the cheaper it will be. That's correct.
Oh,
it sort of begs the question: why are you looking at curved bridges?
So yes, so remember, the goal of the city is to afford the best bridge that money can buy, and that includes aesthetics. So there are all kinds of things that they want to include in there, and that's part of the reason why we selected the CNDC process, is because I want to get that feedback from the builder right away to make sure that we're not putting things in there that the city cannot afford. So it's ultimately it's going to become a decision by the city, but also I want to be mindful that if a utility is dead smack in the middle of that straight bridge, then maybe a curb bridge could be a cheaper way to do it, because then you don't have to relocate expensive utilities. So it's going to become a process. We're initiating the process right now, and my job is to convey to you all the information that we have. We're moving along the process, and those are very good questions. But ultimately, all these questions that you're posing and others are going to decide how it ultimately looks. Hope that answers your questions, Commissioner.
Okay, anyone else? Any members of the public want to speak? Raise your hand. Do you see any, Christina?
No, I don't see anybody.
Okay, this is not an action item, so we will move to the next item, which is an action item. The next item is an authorization to execute agreement number 544 with Myers and Sons Shimmick joint venture for pre-construction services on the Bollinger Canyon Road, Iron Horse Trail bicycle and pedestrian overcrossing project. Ivan will present this also.
So thank you again, Chair. So yeah, this is an action item where staff is seeking authorization for the chair to execute an agreement number 544 with a joint venture of Myers Shimmick in the amount of $350,000 to provide pre-construction services and to allow the executive director to make non-substantive changes. So a little bit of background. In May 2020, the board approved the release of RFP 20-3, where we were soliciting statement of qualifications from interested parties. And that was released. And then we had 5 proposers come in. They were, let me name them so that you are aware who was interested. It was Bridgeway Civil Constructors, it was Golden Gate State Bridge, Granite Construction, Myers and Sons Shimmick, and Walls Construction Company. So we had a lot of interest, 5 firms. A short list was created because some of the people that submitted, or some of the contractors that submitted proposals were deemed not to be able to move forward into the interview process. And 3 firms were interviewed. That was Granite, Myers and Sons, Walsh Construction Company. And out of the selection committee selected Myers Shimmick joint venture to be the most qualified construction. And so that you are aware, the statement of qualifications, it was weighted on both the proposal and the interview. And the big items that we were looking for was experience in projects of similar scope and complexity, record of completing contracts on time and within the contract price, experience in developing and implementing innovative solutions, experience in implementing complicated construction staging, traffic handling, and complying with environmental regulations, qualifications for the key personnel that are going to be working on the project, and an overall understanding and approach of what the project entails. So with that, we ask you to move this item to the full board for their approval at the next board meeting. Open to any questions.
Any questions from board members?
So moved.
Okay, I have a motion from Arnrick.
Second, Geringer.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please, Christina.
Yes, Committee Member Arnrich,
Yes.
Committee Member Pierce,
Yes.
Committee Member Taylor,
Yes.
Vice Chair Geringer,
Yes.
and Chair Butt.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
The next item on the agenda is authorization to execute proposed fund exchange agreement number 555 with the city of San Ramon and approval of resolution 20-30-P on the Bollinger Canyon Road Iron Horse Trail bicycle and pedestrian overcrossing project. Hisham Noemi will present on this item.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and board members. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Back in May, the board took several actions to prepare us for COVID-19 potential impacts on our revenues. One of the actions was to affirm the authority's intent to delay the issuance for future calls for projects for the remaining 2 cycles of the TLC and the PIDWI programs in Measure J. That action was taken to ensure that we don't overprogram our Measure J funds, given the potential decline in our revenues. And you also, at that same meeting, you directed staff to think about fund exchanges that will allow us to advance Measure J projects with other fund sources, and that will also yield benefits to the authority. In 2014, in anticipation of the passage of a new sales tax measure, the authority programmed $9.2 million in STIP funds to advance the I-80 San Pablo Dam Road Phase 2 project. Since then, sadly, our repeated attempts to secure $70 million in needed funds for the projects have not been successful. Because we don't have a local match, our ability to compete for state and federal sources is really hampered. Given this situation, the authority needs to either delay the programming of the STIP funds, the programming year, right now it's in fiscal year 22, or deprogram it altogether and reprogram it in the next cycle of the STIP. So with that as a background, today we are asking you to approve a fund exchange agreement with the City of San Ramon, where we would reprogram the $9.2 million in STIP funds from the San Pablo Dam Road interchange to the Iron Horse Trail project in San Ramon. In return, the authority basically would return an equal amount from the city's return to source funds from Measure J over the next 9 years as a payback. The City of San Ramon was counting on future commitments of Measure J TLC funds to fully fund the Iron Horse Trail project. Since these funds are no longer certain with COVID-19, the city agreed to use its future return to source money to cover the funding shortfall on the project. The proposed fund exchange ensures that the funds are available to the project in fiscal year 22 without requiring the city to take loans, issue bonds, or incur interest to advance their return to source money. In return, the authority will return the city's return to source funds over the next 9 years until an equal amount is paid. The authority will set aside the returned funds in a reserve, in a separate account that can be used then as a match for projects like San Pablo Dam Road, interchange, or others in the future where we need to show local match. There are several other benefits to this agreement that are listed in the staff report. We are asking you today to authorize the chair to execute Agreement 555 with the City of San Ramon, as well as to approve Resolution 2030P, which is required before we can program the project in the STIP. And before I end, I want to thank our executive director for coming up with this idea. This agreement, of course, is contingent upon the CTC programming the STIP funds in fiscal year 2022 and not delaying it. I'm glad to say also that preliminary discussions with their staff indicated they're willing to recommend that. With that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Are there questions or comments from committee members?
If okay, I would move both resolutions at once.
Was that a motion?
Yes.
Okay, motion by Arnerick.
Second.
Second by Pierce, or did you have a question, Julie?
No.
Quite, okay. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak? If so, raise your hand.
I don't see anybody.
Thank you. Okay, call the roll, please.
Christina, you're muted.
So sorry. Committee member Arnrich?
Yes.
Okay. Committee member Pierce?
Yes.
Committee member Taylor?
Yes.
Vice Chair Geringer?
Yes.
And Chair Butt?
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
The next item is Innovate 680 Automated Driving System Project. Authorization to execute cooperative agreement number 110.01 with the Federal Transit Administration for ADS grant funds. Jack Hall will present this item.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Jack Hall, and I'm the Intelligent Transportation Systems and Connected Autonomous Vehicle Program Manager for CCTA. This morning, we are presenting our automated driving system project and are seeking approval of our grant agreement with the Federal Transit Administration, who is administering this grant. At CCTA, we believe in the benefits of automation, and we need to give credit to Randy Iwasaki for being the driving force behind receiving the $7.5 million grant from the U.S. Department of Transportation. Safety is our #1 priority, and automated vehicles can potentially save lives and reduce injuries. 94% of serious crashes are due to human error. Connected and autonomous vehicles can help improve access and increase mobility to meet the needs of local communities. For those with a disability, the elderly, or no direct access to public transit, this could provide a more independent life. Also, with more connected and automated vehicles on the road, the vehicles would communicate with each other, as well as with vehicle to infrastructure systems to help increase driver efficiency, reduce congestion, and lower vehicle emissions. Our shared autonomous vehicle shuttles are all electric, reducing the carbon footprint. There are also economic and societal benefits. California had the second most fatal crashes in the US in 2018 with 3,602. US motor vehicle deaths topped 40,000 in 2017. There's estimates that the cost to society of motor vehicle crashes and injuries totaled $413.8 billion. Our proposed demonstration projects are based on actual needs and concerns that the community brought to our agency for innovative solutions to everyday challenges. The Rossmoor First Mile, Last Mile Shared Autonomous Vehicle Demonstration is based on a request from a committee of residents living in the Rossmoor Walnut Creek senior community to help increase transit accessibility for their transit-dependent residents. A meeting with doctors from the county hospital revealed that limited and restrictive transit options were creating obstacles to care for some of the most vulnerable patients. Project 1 is the Rossmoor First Mile, Last Mile Shared Autonomous Vehicle Project. The goal is to increase transit accessibility for the elderly and people with disabilities with shared autonomous vehicles, connecting the community to jobs, services, and goods to maintain their quality of life. The project intends to solve the first mile, last mile challenges by using level 3 and 4 vehicles to empower seniors by connecting the residents of Rossmoor to the greater Walnut Creek community and beyond. Through improved access to transit service providers, Rossmoor is an active living community with the average age of residents being 77 years old. While most residents are retired, some are still of pre-retirement age. About 12% are 64 years old or younger, and about 29% are 65 to 75 years or 74 years old. The SAVs will enhance mobility within the Rossmoor community and between the cities and everyday destinations throughout the region and solve transit accessibility and connectivity issues. We'll be using a fixed route SAV shuttle service that will provide increased transit accessibility and will gather data to develop safety performance measures. We'll be using a fixed route service with multiple stop locations along a predetermined path to load and unload passengers. Our human-machine interface will allow the user to identify desired stops, and we'll be using Q-strength automated securement and restraint systems for the wheelchairs. Wrong way. The project 2 is the County Hospital Accessible Transportation Project in Martinez. We will provide on-demand autonomous vehicle shuttle service to transportation challenged patients receiving care at the county hospital, thereby addressing the rise of appointment absenteeism by adding additional transportation options. Possible future expansion of service areas will include on-demand services in Concord, Pleasant Hill, and Walnut Creek. Project 3 is our personal mobility project on the Interstate 680 proposed between Bollinger Canyon Interchange and El Costa Boulevard. The goal of this project is to prepare a portion of the I-680 corridor for future connected autonomous vehicles. We will install new and upgraded vehicle to infrastructure and vehicle to vehicle 4 and 5G communications to accommodate this new technology. The idea that we are testing is to find out if we can get more throughput on the corridor using advanced technology. Some of the new automated driving system technologies we will be testing include high definition dynamic mapping and dynamic data describing high-risk areas that will assist in paving the way for automated vehicle solutions in the corridor. Collectively, our proposed demonstration projects will benefit the public by improving safety on our roads, reducing traffic congestion and accidents, reducing carbon dioxide emissions, and lowering fuel consumption. Our projects will greatly improve transportation accessibility for transportation challenged communities, reduce travel time and transportation costs, and promote better health. With that, staff seeks authorization to move this item to the full board for the chair to execute cooperative agreement number 110.01 with the Federal Transit Administration in the amount of $7.5 million in automated driving system grant funds, and to allow the executive director or his designee to make any non-substantial changes to the language. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there questions or comments from board members? Newell.
Thanks, Jack. Exciting project. My God, though, the contract, 416 pages. I hope the report's shorter than that as a result. The one observation and is between, on the smart corridor between El Costa and Bollinger. You know, and I know money's the issue, but it would really make sense if the corridor study was between Crow Canyon and El Costa, because the test is to determine, can you help traffic flow because of the high volume, the peak impacts that are caused by the on and off movements at Bollinger. That if you're only, it's sort of like you're only doing one direction on that. It's like, I'm not sure the answer or the effectiveness of that study is broad and bold enough to really change, because it's the confluence of that traffic in peak rush times. It goes different directions, but it is coming from both ways. Is that really valid? How much more would it cost us to add that other section? Because then we're covering it, no matter how you move in and out. And we can say, here's an intersection with X volume, which is really high, and it doesn't have all the improvements we'd like to see it in terms of on and off, but technology could help solve that. Wouldn't it be a more valid study if we could do it? And what would it take to add that?
Sure, that's a very good question. We're still in the planning stages of this project. And so I think there is an opportunity to look at maybe moving the start and stop of the corridor of where we're planning on putting the technology. And we'll take your comments to heart. And as we develop our plan, we can look at trying to change that.
And there may be, and Randy, there may be some funds that maybe Danville, San Ramon, somebody might have that are regional funds that are only for I-680 corridor, that if we needed a little bit more to do that, I just think the validity would be really high, that we might be able to help. So thank you.
Any other questions? Julie?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I really, really appreciate this project. The advantages for those who have difficulty getting to particularly medical appointments and being there when they're supposed to be there and safely without completely exhausting them, you know, having to make it a whole day affair to go to a 1-hour appointment. This could really make a difference in people's quality of life. This is huge. And to get them a safe way to do that, I think is just wonderful. So I am fully in support and would be happy to move the item.
Okay, we have a motion from Pierce. We have a second.
Second, Geringer.
Second from Geringer. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on this? If so, raise your hand.
I don't see anybody raising their hand.
Okay, let's call the roll, please.
Committee Member Arnrich,
Yes.
Committee Member Pierce,
Yes.
Committee Member Taylor,
Yes.
Vice Chair Geringer.
Yes, sorry.
Okay, That's okay. And Chair Butt,
Yes.
motion passes unanimously.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is to amend the fiscal year 2020-21 available pay schedule. Terry Ann Grover will present this item.
Good morning, Chair and committee members. This item is being brought to you this morning to amend the current fiscal year 2020-21 publicly available pay schedule. In April, the Authority Board adopted Resolution 2005A to adopt this pay scale. In mid-September, the current Executive Director, Randy, announced his retirement coming up in December. We were all very saddened by this news, but very happy for his opportunity to retire. On September 30th, 2020, a special closed session meeting of the Authority Board was held to discuss the appointment or employment of the authority's executive director position. Action was taken to form a subcommittee at that time of the board to hire or appoint an executive director upon Randy's retirement in December. An independent salary survey was performed for the classification. The subcommittee is recommending that the salary range of the executive director classification be amended so that the minimum monthly salary range is set at 5% above the maximum monthly salary range for the deputy executive director of projects. Staff seeks approval of Resolution 2005A Revision 1, which will amend the publicly available pay schedule for fiscal year 2020-2021 as required by CalPERS to set a revised salary range for the executive director classification. That concludes my presentation. I'll take any questions that you may have.
Anybody have any questions or comments? I don't see any. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak? Raise your hand, please.
I don't see any.
No? Okay, I would entertain a motion.
I'll move. Pierce?
Okay, motion by Pierce, second by Geringer. Call the roll, please.
Committee Member Arnrich,
Yes.
Committee Member Pierce,
Yes.
Committee Member Taylor,
Yes.
Vice Chair Geringer,
Yes.
and Chair Butt.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the approval of a revised authority records management program and approval of resolution 20-31-A. Terry Ann will present this item.
Good morning again. Since 2015, the authority has been endeavoring to deploy technology solutions aimed at reducing paper usage and promoting electronic alternatives, also known as the Progress on Paperless or the POP goal. In 2015, the authority adopted a records management program, a records retention schedule, and policies with an intent to venture towards a digital environment and digital storage. We are here now to update that program and adopt a revised records retention schedule and policies to reflect new laws, current practices that require a trusted document management system to be fully digital. CCTA has made great progress in the past 5 years, sorry. Paper usage has dropped by 88%. We've implemented SharePoint, PrimeGov, eBuilder, PlanetBids, Tyler, PlanGrid, Headlight, DocExpress, BidExpress, NeoGov, NetFile, and other programs to work in a digital cloud-based environment that allows staff to work from anywhere. This made the transition to working remotely smooth when the shelter-in-place orders went into effect earlier this year. But there's one more piece to complete that digital puzzle, and that's a trusted electronic document management system. The first step is to update our records retention schedule and policies, which is why we're here today. Then review those current records against the newly adopted and current schedule and convert those documents to an exact digital image for uploading into a trusted system. This will allow the records to be current, allow better management of the retention life, and ensure that if we receive a Public Records Act request, an audit, or a lawsuit, that we have a more efficient way to search for those files. This will help alleviate staff time, provide for better response times, and continue to ensure that we are an employer of choice. In August and September, we solicited 3 informal proposals from 3 vendors in the field who provide cloud-based systems and are considered trusted systems. They were Laserfiche, Highland Software, which is OnBase, and eFile Cabinet. All staff were invited to view a demonstration of each of these softwares and provide feedback. We're still in the process of procuring a system, and if needed, we will bring this back to the board in the near future. Currently, we are considering a software that may only require executive director approval but are currently working out some issues before final selection. We appreciate control for each of the regional transportation planning committees and allow for them to govern the conduct of their activities and the concurrence of the authority. Each RTPC has a responsibility to adopt their own records retention schedule and policies if they haven't already done so, and it should be consistent with the authority's policy. Staff seeks approval of Resolution 2031A, which will establish a revised records management program, including general refinements and updates to reflect current technology, legal requirements, and a revised records retention schedule and policies. That concludes my presentation. I'll take any questions that you may have.
Anybody have questions or comments? Newell?
Well, comment first, then a related question. Terry Ann, thank you for everything you do to help our agency. You're brilliant, you're bright, and you always come up with great ideas. I have a small favor. I think I asked about this maybe before you were here. Those of us, as long as I can remember, I've been using digital, and Julie and a lot of us do. The problem with our agendas is, unlike what we get in our agencies, you can't tell what item you're on. Like this particular one is 600 pages long. It doesn't have while we have a page number for the contract, we're on page 318 of 416, it doesn't have the item number on there. So to find the item numbers, it takes forever. So if there's a way in all of our technology that we can do our agendas, so when I know even our actual headline, the first page of the agenda item in the detailed packet doesn't have the item number that relates to our agenda. So if there's a way to do that, it would really help us, and I'm sure people who are there. So in your technology, if we could come up with a standard formatting, it'd be very helpful. And I'd move this item and just say thank you.
Okay, motion by Arnerick. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Second by Pierce. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak on this item? Raise your hand, please.
I don't see anybody from the public.
Okay, we have none. So roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Arnrich,
Yes.
Commissioner or Committee Member Pierce,
Yes.
Committee Member Taylor,
Yes.
Vice Chair Geringer,
Yes.
Chair Butt.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay, next item is correspondence and communications. Any comments on any of that? Not hearing any. We'll go to commissioner and staff comments. As chair, I don't have any comments. Are there any comments from commissioners? I don't see any. Are there any comments from the executive staff?
I forgot to mention this during Brian's presentation, but I met with Fitch Rating Services just to thank them, and I wanted some more information on the technicality, technically it's not a affirmation of our rating, but it's a no change kind of a rating. So we're still AA+ by Fitch. And so I met with them, and they're going to give us access to some insight in some of their analysis and their information. So that should help Brian get more details on how the economy is doing and how which direction the bond market's going. So kudos to Brian. You know, we're still a AA+. I told him that we should be AAA still, but I just couldn't bend their arm enough.
Very proud of that rating.
Julie?
Yeah, and I should have brought this up on the last item, the records retention thing and all of that. I want to kind of pile on with what Newell said, but I was just going to share this particular item with my city staff, and I don't find a way to pull this item out of the 400+ pages without sending them the entire document and then saying, go to page 401.
Would be happy to pull that item for you and email it to you if you'd like.
Yeah, that and the resolution I would love to have, but it would be great if we could have a way that say if I want to, and I frequently do, share the sales tax report from CCTA to our city staff. That's something I frequently do. So there are sometimes items that we would like to be able to pass along without having to pass along the whole packet. So if there's a way to do that, that would be wonderful to look at as we're looking for that program that we're going to use.
Okay, I would be happy to have a Zoom meeting with you to show you how to pull those documents out easily. Or I can, moving forward, monthly, send those documents individually if you'd like.
We know how to do that.
Okay.
She's talking about it's technology for chapterization.
Right.
Where you index each one by the name, you create a chapter. That's a PDF function. That's just, it's a little higher level. We're more used to having that. Otherwise, I can go in, highlight page 1, but I got to search through 100 pages and I keep it, where am I? Because I can't find the page unless I visually read every page. But if you do it by chapter, that's tied to the agenda item, you can click on the agenda item and then bingo, you get that item that pops up. You can do it from your master agenda, but on the complete packet, it's not chapterized. And that is just a PDF. And maybe you can look into how the software can create chapters. It's a real nice feature.
To have it that way. I mean, we used to have it so each of the PDFs was a standalone, and now they're all mushed together in one. And I don't know whether that's, you know, part of our new software program or what, but it was a big step backwards from where we were before.
Commissioner Pierce, if you click on the interactive agenda on the web page, it gives you an HTML version. And if you double click on that particular item, it will open up the PDFs below, and you can actually download just the PDF specific to that item by themselves.
Okay.
And I can, Christina, I can also walk you through and show you how to do that.
Yeah, well, just that I should be able to do it. Okay.
Hey, if you guys are going to do a tutorial, why don't you invite us all and walk us through it sometime, okay?
I think that'd be great.
The chapterization is really what we need, because us as junkies, we're not going to keep going back to that agenda and go to that, keep going back. We're going to have the whole packet. And if it's in chapters, I can type chapter 1, boom, instantaneous. It's a real simple function. It'd help all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. We will look into that.
Any other complaints?
Suggestions, please.
Okay.
Suggestions.
Hearing none, we're prepared to adjourn to the next regular meeting for December 3rd, 2020 at 8:30. And unless anybody else has anything, going once, going twice, thank you. We are adjourned.
Everybody.
Thanks, everybody.